Good morning, everyone. Warm welcome to Tirana, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all today for the kickoff of the second Youth Policy Lab on mental health. It is our great pleasure to have policymakers and youth across the Western Balkans 6 region, and after a while it is really nice to see a quite full room of people willing to work together on the issues that are important for young people. Nevertheless, we are also having participants who are joining us via Zoom, and thank you very much for bearing with us. And in this regard, I would also like to greet our colleagues from Brussels and representatives of European Commission. So today and tomorrow we are all together going to work on the regional recommendations on how actually to tackle mental health of young people, but also agree on what has to be done on the level of each of the Western Balkan 6 economies. There is a quite hard work ahead of us in the following months, but having in mind all of your commitments and following the results of the bilateral trainings that we actually held together during November, I am really enthusiastic about the process, and we in the Western Balkans Youth Lab remain to discuss all the following steps. I am Ognjen Markovic, team leader of the Western Balkans Youth Lab project, and I will be glad to guide you throughout the whole Youth Policy Lab process. But now, on the very beginning, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Maja Handžiska-Trendafilova, RCC's Head of Program Department, to address us all. Maja, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ogi. Good morning to all. So, a very warm welcome also from my side to the kickoff of the second Youth Policy Lab in the Western Balkans. And I think that we actually couldn't have found a better place to launch this lab than this vibrant and dynamic Tirana, and also on the eve of the celebrations of the Youth Day. So I really hope that some of the vigor that we all felt on the streets yesterday in Tirana will trickle down to our discussions today. So following the already very successful results that we have together attained as part of the first Youth Policy Lab on youth unemployment, we in RCC are particularly happy to support youth across our region in co-creating and co-managing policies that are important for youth mental health. This innovative and regionally unique approach to enhancing the participation of youth in policy and decision-making also goes in line with the growing importance, growing awareness for the importance of the role of youth that we are seeing both in regional cooperation processes and the EU integration processes. So in this sense, I really want to thank the European Commission for their support for this critical project. But really more importantly, I want to thank youth and I want to thank the policymakers that are joining us today for your commitment, your passion, your contributions in the process, which we really saw in the first Youth Lab, and I'm really confident that we are going to see them in the one that we are kickstarting here today. So if I may now address directly our youth representatives that we are honored to have here with us today. So dear youth, actually during the pandemic, nearly half of your peers reported that health is their primary concern. And after unemployment, health is the second most quoted concern that youth is facing nowadays. And actually only 1/5 of the respondents have expressed satisfaction from the health systems that we have in the region. So one such important concern is the issue of mental health. And of course, the pandemic has brought its distinct feature, distinct challenges when we are discussing about mental health. Be this the fear that all of us had about our lives of our loved ones, about uncertainties, personal, financial future, and the sense of social isolation, alienation that we all felt during the containment measures. But of course, concerns over mental health are not novel, they're not new. The pandemic really merely exacerbated what was there even before. So the threads of this social fabric of the human communications, they're so delicate And COVID really shook them hard. So the pandemic also, unfortunately, unproportionately affected young girls and women, but also marginalized youth. So the data that we in the Regional Cooperation Council have is really telling. It suggests that young people still predominantly rely to family and friends when faced with anxieties, depressions, which also suggests that the institutional policy responses out there are not optimal. They're not sufficient. They're not providing the satisfactory response. So the issue has been long overlooked. It is high time for us to bridge this gap between what are the needs of the young people in terms of addressing mental health on one hand, and the institutional responses on the other hand. So really, you as the chosen representatives of youth that are here with us today are here to provide your voices, your recommendations, and your active engagement in these processes. And we are really not here for a formalistic approach. We are not here for box ticking. So challenge us, policymakers, stir, change. All this for the policies are bettered for all of us. So only by active participation of youth can we create policies that are going to improve the quality of lives in the region. So this is what makes your contribution through the second policy lab really essential, and of course we count on you and look forward for the contributions that we are going to hear these 2 days. Now, Ogi, if I might also use the opportunity to address our policymakers here with us today. Of course, we count on your experience, expertise, support in terms of inclusion of youth in policymaking and decision-making processes. And let me encourage you that you have the public support on this. In our Balkan barometer, 92% of the citizens region-wide believe that the policy-making processes, decision-making processes will be improved and enriched if more youth perspectives are integrated. Because for us, an alternative scenario is unsustainable. An alternative scenario is the one we are living today, in which youth immigration is costing the region 2.5 billion euros annually. And we're actually losing the human capital that is most eager to learn, that is most eager to upskill. You know what our Balkan barometer tells us? 86% of young people are willing to get additional qualifications to land a job. 92% of them would take up more skills to advance in their work. However, unfortunately, and this is the sad reality, 61% of them are willing to do so, but abroad. And really, our region is not that rich to afford squandering such enormous potential. By using our youth, we are also using the most ardent supporters of the EU integration, but also the ones that are real representatives of the values that, that the Union has and towards which we aspire. So really it is our opportunity through the second Youth Lab, not only to hear from young people, but also to learn from them and to shape together the societies that we want to live in. Even if this means for many of us, you know, being challenged or being shaken or getting out of our comfort zones and out of our status quos or walking some untrodden roads. So if I can now sum up, dear all, really, we are happy to see that youth is gaining more prominence in the EU, as I said, in the support to the region and in regional cooperation. And youth cooperation now has become really integral part of the Berlin process. Youth is an unmistakable element of all the EU Western Balkan Summit conclusions, etc. And of course, this declaratory support is maybe an important first step, but it is far from enough. So we really need to establish such concrete mechanisms, like through the Youth Lab, so we can see some more real and sustainable integration of youth in decision-making processes. So let me just also say that youth participation and policy co-creation, they're a process. They're not a one-off thing. They're not a project that has an end date or an expiration date. So they're not ending with the Youth Lab as such. But they're also a learning curve. So we pick up, we improve. So every Youth Lab, we improve and we learn together so that youth becomes more and more a natural partner when it comes to cooperation with public administration. So really, once again, thank you. I welcome you, and I wish best of luck to all the representatives from the National Youth Councils, the umbrella organizations, and of course the representatives of the public administrations that are here today. And I think that armed with our can-do attitude, we are now embarking on 2 days of sharing, actively listening, of course reflecting, embracing, nurturing, co-creating, and appreciating. And I think that, as you said, Olgi, work ahead might be challenging, but it is also extremely, extremely rewarding. So there is no health without mental health. This is a fact. So promoting, preventing, and caring for mental health really translates into youth increased participation, be this in communities, school, workplaces, and families, and this is what we are looking for, active youth that is shaping and that is excelling. So looking forward to the accomplishment that we jointly make these days towards a bit more youth-friendly, future-friendly, and stronger societies. And I'm ending on this note. We have an important milestone ahead of us next year, which is the European Year of Youth. So I'm really calling upon all of us to be challenged also to deliver and showcase our results in this context as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish all of us really, really very engaging and packed 2 days in discussions. Olgi, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you a lot. So, I mean, as having the regional pool of experts here with us today, this is your process, and the Youth Policy Lab is actually based only on human capital and the people who are engaged in. So it is our role in RCC to make sure that all conditions are there for your discussions, but as you could learn during the bilateral trainings, again, it's all up to you, your ideas, and your approaches towards mental health and creating policies for youth that will actually make our position in society better and more inclusive. Therefore, as Maya mentioned, I believe that we are all learning from each other and also learning from some of the mistakes, but also some of the good practices. And therefore, you as the members of the regional pool of experts on the Youth Policy Lab on mental health, you are having the opportunity to have the members of the regional pool of experts of the first Youth Policy Lab that is actually being organized on the topic of youth unemployment. And also we in RCC also learned what to be changed or what should be improved. So I hope that even the Youth Policy Lab on mental health will show us even better results or some of the new ideas when it comes to Youth Policy Lab. Later on, you will meet our great facilitators who are actually the ones who translated the EU Youth Dialogue to the context of the Western Balkans. And somehow the Youth Policy Lab methodology per se is also a living process. So it can also be improved within the initiative, having in mind all the inputs of young people and policymakers. But without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Petra Balažić, who is political advisor in RCC, but also Youth Lab coordinator, without whose great support we would not be able to be here today, to initiate the panel discussion, or rather say panel debate on the mental health issues together with the panelists that we are having throughout the whole region. So Petra, please join us on stage.
Thank you, Olgi. Thank you, Maya. So I will invite also my co-panelists as soon as the chairs are prepared to join me on stage. And please allow us just 1 minute to get the technical issues under control. It will be just 1 minute. In the meantime, the panelists who are ready can please join the stage. Sit never. It will just be 1 minute just to get the microphones working for everyone. Gdje vam odgovara?
Only this one here. Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, we are all up here now. Sorry for making you wait for a minute, but we do want to be able to hear everyone properly. So welcome everyone from my side. Thank you to Maya and to Ognjen for their introductory remarks. And I want to thank panelists for being here with us today and for sharing with us and with all of you their invaluable expertise. We were able to hear in the introductory remarks some of the statistics regarding the mental health in the region and beyond. But I also want to share with you some of the research I have done preparing for this panel, and relying on the World Health Organization data, I have calculated that the suicide rate for the Western Balkans young people, so ages 15 to 29, is 6.5 per 100,000 population. That means that each year more than 6 lives, young lives, are lost to suicide alone. But I also want to say that suicide is not the only issue here. It's only the most dramatic outcome of struggling with mental health issues. We don't know how many of young people are battling feelings of mild anxiety every day, feelings of depression, and a range of other mental health disorders. And when I say that, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, because we have representatives of youth here from the region who, I'm sure, unfortunately, through their everyday exchange with their peers, are quite aware of this problem. So it is no longer a question of why we should talk about the mental health, but rather how serious we are taking it, and why we are having troubles associating it with young people. So to talk with me today about that are my distinguished panelists. At the end is Ms. Stanislava Vučković, who is a youth and development specialist at UNICEF. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Then we have Katja Čič with us here today from Slovenia. She is a project associate at the International Youth Health Organization, describes herself as a public health enthusiast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Then we have Ms. Nikolina Radović, who is a youth worker working with adolescents and young adults on projects regarding mental health in Montenegro.
Thank you.
Then it's Francesca Muccio, the Executive Director of Young Professionals Network and the Youth Representative in the RICO Governing Board. And finally, Dr. Angela Gramo, a certified psychotherapist with 19 years of clinical experience and a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Social Sciences at the Department of Social Work and Social Policies in Tirana. Warm welcome to all of you. And without further ado, let's begin our discussion. My first question goes to Ms. Stanislava Vučković. So you are working as a youth and development specialist at UNICEF Serbia. And as someone working at the global organization, what have you recognized to be the key difficulties which young people in Serbia and in the region are facing? How do these difficulties affect their mental health? What are some of the consequences of that, and does UNICEF have any solutions for this?
Thank you for the invitation, and I will try to remember all these 4 questions in one.
I can repeat them, that's not a problem.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm very grateful to our CCE for the organization of the event and for connecting all of us to unpack this rather complicated concept of mental health and psychosocial support. It seems that it is an easy topic, an easy term, and since we all have mental health, we individually, personally, deeply know what it is, but in the concept of theory and action, it is a rather complicated service package to unpack, create, and coordinate amongst us. Well, mental health of young people is, let's say, ability to function in everyday life, to achieve all these important tasks related to schooling, to intimate relationship, romantic relationship, and to grow with this additional, let's say, sense of independence. For us in UNICEF, it is the second window of opportunity when we are looking into the life cycle of a person. The one for, the most important are early years, and there is a huge development that is taking place in all these 5 years, from baby to let's say, a person who can talk, walk, establish connections with others and with parents. The other important window of opportunity is adolescence, because of the huge transformation that is going on. So we know that also from the science, brain of young person is specifically sensitive to everything, to positive and negative things. So it is also very important to look at this period of life from this angle. And as we know, also individually and by looking at other peers and from the sciences, adolescents are increasingly interested for taking risks. And these risks should be, let's say, taken in very protective circumstances, in schools, in communities, within NGOs, with other peers. So there is a lot to do and to experience, even within the formal and, let's say, community organizations. So it is our role to provide those opportunities, our major role. Now, when it comes to pandemics, lack of services which young people on the whole world experienced meant lack of stability, which is very important for every child and young person. This meant a lack of peer relations and lack of, let's say, routine things and connections and finishing tasks. And this is the reason why let's say, emotions and fears were rising. We did 3 waves of research during the pandemics in UNICEF, and we have found out in all 3 waves of research that adolescents from 13 to 17 were the ones experiencing problems in mental health, and the most impacted were those who are living in big urban centers and coming from families with lower, let's say, financial resources. So they are the ones that we have to reach and, let's say, engage. The other thing is that what we did, we have this U-Report platform with more than 10,000 people on board, young people, and we have asked, and this is what we found out, that especially what was said in the beginning, that they do not go to doctors, they do not go to school counselors. When they need support, they talk to families and friends the most. And some of it recognize psychologists as important sources of help, which is personally for me good, because I'm a trained psychotherapist and psychologist by profession. So I'm very happy to see that psychologists are recognized as a good resource. So the question is where we have the most psychologists within systems, formal systems, in education. In Serbia, the majority of workforce is in education. We are happy to have psychologists in every school, but we also have some psychologists in primary health centers and also secondary and tertiary institutions. And those are important when a person experiences challenges. But on the primary level, we need to establish knowledge and understanding. We know that in our region there is a lot of stigma related to mental health, and also this is a global problem. So during October 2021, there was a big campaign in UNICEF called On My Mind, which was, let's say, push towards stigma-free conversation. And also in Serbia we did a campaign, it is called Izmo Googla, or from my angle, from my point of view. And this was especially important for young people to hear that it is okay not to be okay, that is okay to start this conversation about your, let's say, how do you feel, what you're experiencing, and so on. So this campaign can be also found online, and it was followed by establishment of a website. It is not yet another website. It is a resource for every young people to come to read, to experience, to chat about the mental health, because in that way mental health literacy is increased, and we know that if somebody cannot recognize when to go to for support, this is a major bottleneck when it comes to early prevention and, let's say, making mental health problems less serious. So this mental health platform is accessible to all who can read and understand our language. It is called Sve je OK, and it will be also a resource for all sectors. Now we have it only for young people, but it will be developed in communication and coordination with Opens NGO, and we will have material for health professionals, for teachers and parents, social workers, NGOs as well. So we need to make it more interactive, more appealing, and we need to invite all these professionals to stick together and to co-create. We will be also inviting professionals from our country to sit together and to really develop this service package model, because it is important to see what can one teacher do, what is the role of school psychologists or pedagogists, how to recognize these red flags, and it is also important to communicate these red flags to all, because it is difficult to distinguish what is normal and what is, let's say, difficult. So these red flags are important. Now, when the person recognizes who they are referred to, what kind of services, are they available in the community, and who is providing, how those providers are recognized by profession and others, and how do they refer, let's say, up in health system. So there is a lot of things to be done in this regard, and I do hope that we together also throughout these days, 2 days, we'll unpack this problem and create together. And one small thing for the very last point, we have understood that participation of young people is enormously important. And I'm very grateful also to one of my colleagues who cannot be with us today because she's a young member of the team, and he was the one really pushing hard for a creation of youth reference group to work with us on mental health. So we kind of had this open call for young people. We wanted somebody who has lived in experience and who is interested for this. And with those very, very important group of people, we created a website, topics, discussions, and they really are with us, and they are really celebrating all these milestones with us. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank our youth for this participation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I especially like the point about the U reports, because asking young people and having this kind of surveys is the first and most basic steps to really understanding where young people are coming from and what they are experiencing. Without that, we cannot start this sort of process of policy co-creation if we don't even know what is going on with them. I'm also hoping that we have online Dr. Sofia Georgievska. I hope that she has been able to join us and that I can introduce her. She's a professor at the Institute for Social Work and Social Policy in North Macedonia. I hope that she can hear us and she's with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. I'm sorry that you weren't able to be here with us in person, but I'm sure that there will be other opportunities.
Of course.
I wanted to ask you, you have dedicated a part of your research and work to working with marginalized groups. And we have heard also from Ms. Vučković that it is important also to reach young people with different backgrounds and make sure that they have access to mental health services as well. But from your experience, what are some of the particular challenges when it comes to young people from marginalized groups in terms of mental health? The challenges that they face, are they different? In what way are they different? And do we have suitable mechanisms in place to address those specific challenges?
Thank you very much. Yes, of course, it is not a secret that mental illness is extremely stigmatized, and mental health care is often inaccessible. And I think that yet mental health holds significant weight in our daily lives and society. But also, all this is much more difficult when we are speaking and when we are talking about people with that are people from marginalized groups. And the stigma associated with mental illness and is connected with the sense of shame, a sense of embarrassment that maybe people that are coming from marginalized groups are facing it more. When I'm speaking about people of marginalized groups, I'm speaking about persons that live in rural areas. I'm speaking more about girls, about people with disabilities, about people from LGBT population, about people from other nationalities, and I think that those are the ones that are facing more difficulties and more actually problems that are connected with mental health issues. Anyway, last year we have conducted one research in Faculty of Philosophy was actually the one that started the initiative to conduct a research about the mental health issues and about what are young people facing with in the period of pandemic. And it's interesting that we have found data that people during the pandemic are feeling maybe more happy and more satisfied from their lives in comparison to 3 or 4 years ago. And we have asked why, because everyone is speaking about health, and we are all facing with problems connected with mental health, but we have figured out that during this period of COVID, there were a lot of free counsel offices, there were a lot of free webinars, there were a lot of free phones where people can call and people can reach free psychological support and free psychological help. I mean, too often I'm hearing phrases like counseling is too expensive, like I will think about it, like I don't know, a therapist doesn't know anything about us, so he cannot handle my situation. And I think that the stigmatization and the high cost of mental health make it hard to access, and when we access, actually we are creating problems with true healing and the treatment. So we, as a community, also as a faculty of philosophy, where we teach students on to be professionals and to help the others, especially those that are coming from vulnerable groups, we must work and to eliminate this systematic structure and these boundaries that other peoples are facing, especially those from marginalized groups. What our research showed, when we are talking about people that are not coming from marginalized groups, we can say that maybe on a scale from 1 to 10, they are satisfied like 7.5. And we have found out that 58% from the people with disabilities, young people with disabilities from 18 to 25, and 58% from adult people with disabilities from 26 to 49 that have serious mental illness did not receive treatment. So it's something that is really pity, and something that we have to ask why and what is happening to them. Also, we found out that about 1 of 3 people in Macedonia that are stateless people or asylum seekers and refugees experience high rate of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorders. I think that these are the most 2 groups that we have to focus on in our future steps, because I think that they are the most one that are deprived and the most one that are marginalized and that are left behind instead of leaving no one behind according to the Agenda 2030. Also, children and adolescents that are coming from dysfunctional families have the highest rate of lifetime major depression episodes, and also they have highest self-reported depression rates that are, especially when we are making comparison with the children that are coming from functional families. It is also worth to be mentioned that 1 of 5 girls in Macedonia has mental health problems such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, or eating disorder, and the rate of suicide attempts is 4 times greater for lesbian, gay and bisexual youth, and 2 times greater for questioning youth that are heterosexual youth. So I really want to say that without government, without academia, without business sector, we cannot work together. We all should work together and stimulate the mental health problem, and especially we should focus those people to learn strategies and daily routines like managing and reducing stress, like getting regular exercises. Also, something that is very important is to cultivate a sense of belonging, seeking help and support, supporting others to do the same, but also it's something that is very, very important is that we should educate ourselves. So actually we should stimulate young people to educate themselves and to offer compassion and understanding. I'm very proud to say that in the European Year of Youth, Faculty of Philosophy is planning to open an office for youth and mental health. I'm hoping that we will receive some amount and support, and that our students, because we have students from all of the country, will help together with the local communities for counseling and coaching in life. Also, it is a plan for the students that are fourth year from all the helping professions like psychologists, social workers, family therapists, and special educators and rehabilitators, and also to work in the main office in Skopje. And I think that it will be one of the ways that we can support people with disabilities, because that will be on the, we will have also, we are planning to have sign language instructions, braille letter instructions, and also we are planning to send our students from the fourth year on practical work in the two main centers for shelter centers for people that are refugees and asylum seekers in Visbegovo and Evgelia. And I think that it's one of the ways that we can foster and encourage them and support their mental health.
Thank you very much. So I think we can conclude that marginalized groups really do deserve more attention that they are getting currently, as well as that it needs to be something on the agenda of the whole society. So rather than seeing them as targeted group, to consider marginalized groups as part of the overall efforts to improve the health of societies. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
My next question goes to Dr. Gramo. Hello. Hello. Closest to me.
Right.
So you have extensive and long-term experience in counseling and psychotherapy with young adults. And from that experience, what are some of the changes that you have noticed in mental health needs during the COVID-19 pandemic? Has there been a rise in demand for counseling? What were the key triggers for this, do you think? And as a follow-up to that, what are some of the limitations in offering effective professional psychological help to young adults?
Okay. Well, I thank you very much for the invitation. It's very important to give this kind of presentations and discussions, especially when in a group, concerning the needs of the young adults of Western Balkans. I will try to combine the information from the observations from my consulting room and with that of empirical evidence from the available research. During my work with young adults, I have often questioned myself, where does the child end? And where does the teenager begin? How much space does one have to exercise own freedom and become a young adult? There is a misconception about young adults. Because young adults are in a better health compared to older adults, they are believed to be in a good health. Developmentally speaking, young adulthood period is not characterized by dramatic changes as adolescence, because this is what we tend to focus on: teenager, hormones changes, aggressive outbursts, and all of that. This may be the reason why the young adulthood is somehow devalued as a critical development period and is usually left in the shadow. The social, emotional, and cognitive maturational development in the young adult is more linear and not necessarily obvious, but the challenges experienced throughout this stage are critical and important. Major issues related to the mental health of young adults are linked with their struggle in developing psychological capacities, with a focus on self-regulation and decision-making, which appear complicated by the efforts to adapt to the role transitions. The struggle to become independent on one hand, and the resistance to lose the parental support is essential to the process of becoming a young adult, and this is a process that never ends. Social functioning between transitions from adolescence to young adulthood and from young adulthood to middle adulthood is the main aspect which is brought them into the consulting room. But their development is placed and shaped by the societal factors and historical factors which play an important role on the roughness of the process that they have to go. The concepts of guilt and shame are culturally embedded. They are fundamental to the development of self-consciousness. Both shame and guilt may become characteristic ways of responding to life experiences. Empirical evidence supports the relation of shame to psychopathology. An emphasis is placed on the external shame, which is linked with depressive symptoms. This is the case, and it's very often that in the consulting room people would say that it is very difficult to tell to your friends that your life doesn't make sense anymore, because one feels ashamed that the others may call her insane, crazy. Thus, the person isolates himself, feeling an outsider to his own group. The volatile Albanian and Western Balkans political history has exposed people to significant intrapsychic trauma. The experience of wars and lockdown has brought people closer to the denied traumatic experiences of the past. This is something we're not conscious, but it's very active, and the lockdown has really triggered and pushed this and brought it in the surface. Young adults unconsciously carry the traumatic past in their present and that of their families without understanding. Transgenerational trauma has been activated by the lockdown, shaking people's lives, in particular those of young adults. Fears about the present, because they had to survive, versus fears about the future. Life versus death. Uncertainty produces anxiety, and it does sit well with people, and in particular, young adults, who have to shift their life's motives to find some balance in their independent struggle or to strive for emotional survival. Losses appear to have accompanied lives of the people of Western Balkans, but their needs to mourn, to grieve, despair, and hate have never been addressed. They may have rather been encapsulated within the persons, their families, social structures, in the community, and the nation itself. Fear and uncertainty for the future is still present in today's society in the region, where people are dealing with the illusions of our political and economic times, while enduring the frustration to fit to the European Union. The lack of Albanian self-consciousness on mental health and the fear of mental illness seem to be linked with the culture of dependency, as a consequence of their deprivation of freedom during the communist era. It has not been researched, but there is a considerable evidence to think about how the history has shaped one's perception, thus attitudes toward mental health during the communist regime. In a text of forensic psychiatry published at that time during the communist regime, I found out some very important information. The political functions of the psychiatric care have been documented during the totalitarian regime. Psychiatric evaluation aimed at preventing the socially dangerously ill person is formulated by the Article 99 of the Code of the Penal Procedure. Psychiatric evaluations at the time were requested only by organs of inquisition, judicial organs, and execution branch of penal decisions. Based on my clinical practice, 90% of those who receive psychotherapy are young adults, aged from 18 to 30 years old. I have observed that the number of those who ask for counseling and psychotherapy is higher due to the pandemic compared to pre-pandemic period. It's important to emphasize that I'm referring only to those young adults who have the financial means to receive psychological services. From this category, half have chosen to come voluntarily based on personal family experience with COVID-19, loss of a family member or a loved one, while half have been referred by the psychiatrist as a result of an outburst, mainly anxiety and depression symptomatology triggered but not caused by COVID-19. There is no information of those who cannot afford those services, while the need for professional help is at its peak as never before. Thus, those who suffer from mental and emotional conditions are undetected and untreated. According to research, depression remains largely undiagnosed in Europe, Asia, and the rest of the world. But what happens to those who do not get professional help? From a psychoanalytical point of view, the so-called defense mechanisms get transformed into either avoidant or self-destructive strategies of coping, leaving them devastated and deluded that they can get better with time. Substance abuse appears to be an instrument reinforcing the illusion of the survival. What cannot be understood and are difficult to be spoken can be swallowed or acted out in various ways. Experiences of COVID-19 are unique, consisting on a constellation of factors such as socioeconomic status, lifestyle, loss of a loved one, fear of death, previous untreated mental health conditions, unprocessed early trauma. It is typical for those young adults who receive psychotherapy during pandemic to report more somatic complaints compared to pre-pandemic. As known, the psychological disturbances that do not get recognized and addressed are transformed into bodily, unexplained concerns. We have a headache, I don't feel well, I feel tired, exhausted, I have a back pain. I overcome COVID-19 and I'm cured. I'm supposed to be feeling well, but I'm not. What is happening with me? This is often something that I hear in the consulting room. What does not get recognized is the traumatic experience. Not to mention the earlier ones that may have been awakened, surfaced. Body remembers what psyche cannot deal with. As the research suggests, compared to other mental health conditions, post-traumatic stress disorders take a lifetime to be dealt with and gradually processed. Besides individual psychotherapy, group psychotherapy is another method of treatment of the individual through the group, including the group. The Association of Group Analysis in Albania promotes group psychotherapy and is actually coordinating the qualification of the first generation of the Albanian psychoanalytical group psychotherapists in collaboration with the Institute of Group Analysis in UK. Since 2017, GAA started offering monthly group experiences free of charge for young adults. The very first group experience proved successful, gathering around 70 participants, among them parents and other interested individuals. During the lockdown, GAA group psychotherapists switched to the online version, offering it twice a month. Participants referred to it as a safe place to connect with others and lost part of themselves when everything else was disconnected. Only in October of this year, we returned to live monthly group experiences, having at least a core of approximately 10 regular participants, with new ones that join in every session. The advantage of group psychotherapy experiences can be offered to a variety of group sizes, starting with 8, but can become as large as 100 to 200 people. Experiencing similarities with others encourages people to open up and gradually start learning to speak the unspeakable. And the last one, psychotherapy as an isolated profession in our region. There is an immediate need for qualified professionals. It's not just there are psychological services, go and get them. No. There are many psychologists, at least in our country, that are not trained in psychotherapy and offer their services privately with no supervision at all. Secondly, assessment of clinical symptomatology in the non-clinical population of young adults is a necessity for improving research and clinical services. Psychotherapy is an independent scientific discipline, a practice of which is represented as independent starting from the efforts of European Association for Psychotherapy in 1990 from the Strasbourg Declaration of Psychotherapy. For the last 2 decades, the European Association for Psychotherapy has contributed to the development of psychotherapy as an independent profession across Europe, promoting recognition and common standards of training in psychotherapy throughout Europe. But the qualification in psychotherapy consists of 4 years of training at master's level, meeting all the requirements set by EAP, 1,400 hours concerning theory, clinical practice, etc. Based on January 2021 report of EAP on legal position of psychotherapy in Europe, the profession of psychotherapy is not regulated by law in many countries. Yet, the majority have adopted ways to recognize the practice of psychotherapy with certain restrictions. For example, there is no law to regulate this profession in Albania, Kosovo, Serbia, and Slovenia. In Serbia and Slovenia, differently from Albania and Kosovo, professional organizations are involved in concrete discussions with state bodies and ministries in regard to the legal regulation of psychotherapy at a national level. And we have been collaborating, I hope we'll continue to do so with the Institute of Psychodrama in Belgrade. Based on this collaboration we had with this institute, we have actually supported a training of another generation of psychodrama in Albania. And last, if there is a vaccine which helps people to improve their immunity toward COVID, I wonder what will happen with the long-term consequences of trauma. Because the emotional memories, they stay with us and they affect our lives in detrimental ways. So we really need to be focusing on how to help young adults to build their resilience. And this is not a question of a pill of a vaccine. This is a long process that has to do with encouraging them to really learn how to speak and make sense of their traumatic experiences of the past and the present. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grama. You've raised quite a number of very interesting points. One, I would say, is this need not to ignore young adults, that it is still a phase where people are developing and where they need support. So not just focusing on children and adolescents, but also young adults. Also, the point that you have made about considering the transgenerational trauma and linking it to the uncertainties about the future. And there have been many points, but I want to emphasize especially when you have talked about the legal regulation.
Absolutely.
And I am emphasizing this because that is why we are also here today, and that is what this process is all about, to also see some changes at the legal or policy level. So it's good to have this in mind, that this is also something that requires urgent attention. So to Ms. Radovic, who is working directly with adolescents and young adults in sort of workshop format as well. From your experience, what do young people in Montenegro see as the solutions to this gap between their needs and the services that are provided? Are there any gaps, and are there any solutions on the horizon how to address that?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say hi to everyone here, and I am really happy to be part of this event and to be able to speak in the name of young people from my country. As Petra just said, I am from Montenegro. I am a psychologist, and I am working with young people. In the past year, we have been we organized some workshops for young adults 15 to 30 years old, and I moderated those workshops. The main goal of them was to get to know those young people and to get to know their needs regarding mental health. We also tried to find out what are the main barriers for young adults in Montenegro being mentally healthy. Also, we tried to give them a chance to speak up and to say what would they change in our society if they were those who are making decisions. So you asked me to speak about solutions we came up with. But first of all, I would probably need to mention those problems we discovered. In my opinion, in Montenegro, first problem is lack of awareness and lack of knowledge, lack of information, we would say. So young person in my country don't have information about what it means to be a mentally healthy person. And that is the first problem that keeps young people from seeking help in those situations they probably need it. Also, I think half of the participants of those workshops we organized said that they probably would not visit psychologists even when they thought they should. And in their opinion, that was because talking to mental health professional is a sign of weakness. So we could probably say that second bump on the road to being one mentally healthy person in Montenegro is fear of being judged. So even when a young person wants to talk to someone about what they are experiencing and what they are going through, there is a big possibility that they won't do it because their fear of being judged by their friends or even their family members keeps them from seeking help when they need it. Also, I think a couple of those participants told us that they sought help and talked to psychologists, but they went for help to different cities just to avoid being judged by their friends or people in their surroundings. That was a really sad thing to hear for me as someone who is a psychologist, but at least there is a positive side that they asked for help. So we could say that stigma about talking to a mental health professional is a very big problem in my country, and it is important for us to work on that problem if we want to improve mental health of young people. So those two first issues I mentioned are somehow connected. The lack of knowledge, of course, leads to being judgmental to others when it comes to seeking help. And we talk to young people about what would they do and what solutions do they have in mind. And I'm very proud to say that they had a lot of ideas and it was amazing. But when it comes to those two first issues I mentioned, their main idea was the need to introduce young people to topic of psychology and to main constructs and what it means to be mentally healthy at earlier age, because in our educational system, young people are introduced to mental health in second grade of high school, I think, in school subject psychology. Still, it is very important to mention that in some schools there are no subjects where young people study about mental health, and that probably is not helping us either. It would be a big thing to ask to change the whole educational system, but maybe for starters, it would be great if we had more those educational workshops about mental health for young people in both elementary and in high schools, and that would probably help them open up and talk to others more. So those were the first two problems, and when it comes to third problem, I think this problem is easier to solve than the first two ones. In a situation where a young person in Montenegro wants to talk to someone about their experiences or has some problems, and when they overcome their fear of being judged, there is also a big chance that they won't seek help. And the reason for that is because young people in Montenegro don't have information about where can they get the help they need. We, of course, have psychologists who work in schools, both elementary and in high schools, and on the other hand, there are psychologists who work in the healthcare system. But when we consider that, we could say, okay, young adults in Montenegro have options. They could choose to visit psychologists who work at their school, or they could go to mental health centers in the healthcare system. But things are not as clear as they seem to be, or we could say that rules are not as clear as they seem to be. Probably in this moment I need to take a step back and say that things I'm sharing with you today, informations I'm sharing, are not my opinions. Those are informations I gathered while talking to young people, and are not my opinions about professional knowledge of my colleagues, because now I'm going to be talking about psychologists who work in high schools and in healthcare system. When it comes to psychologists who works in schools, we could say that main issue with them is that young people don't trust them at all, and they don't think school psychologists are doing their job as well as they should be. So even though we can say school psychologists exist, children don't perceive them as involved in their education as they should be. So that problem could be solved easily, as we would all agree, but nobody is doing anything about it. And some ideas young people had when it comes to solutions to those problems is workshops, a lot of ideas about workshops or educational seminars for their teachers about recognizing mental health problems in their students. And of course, the other idea, which would be great, is making visits to school psychologists something that is mandatory. We probably would all agree that that period of time, high school, is a very stressful period of time for every young adult, and it is a period where, with a lot of changes and a lot of expectations from young people. It is expected from them to make big decisions about their future, to decide what are they going to do with their lives. So some of the ideas young people had were to make topic of professional orientation something that would be a necessary topic in those mandatory meetings with school psychologists. And I think it would be great. It would be at least for those who are high school seniors, we could say, because they are on the edge of making those decisions. And on the other hand, when it comes to mental health in healthcare system, we, in almost every city in Montenegro, we have mental health centers. And every person could walk in one of those centers and ask for help. But there is a problem with young people. They are not doing that. So we talk about those problems also, and young people said that they don't think they could seek help in those centers. They don't have information about what kind of services those centers would offer to them, and they are also underage sometimes, and they think they need to bring their parents to those centers, or they need to get some kind of permissions from their parents to go to mental health center. And of course, also, as you all can see, this is one problem that could be solved pretty easy, and those problems, in opinion of young minds in Montenegro, could be solved just by spreading awareness about where psychologists work. And also, additionally, they thought that it would be very helpful if representatives of those centers would be given opportunity to talk directly to young people at their schools and give them information about how can they go to mental health center, what do they need, and what kind of services are offered to them there. So today I chose just some of the problems and some of the solutions young people had to present to you, but as I said earlier, young people had a lot of ideas, and I think this topic is crucial, and it is really important for us to talk about it more and to do something about it, because I think that we as a society have to help young people's voices being heard, because society is the one who needs to change, not young people. They are great just the way they are. And of course, I hope that you all heard me today and that there will be some changes in my country in near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Radovic. I want to underline what you said about young people having great ideas, and from our experience in the Youth Lab, that is absolutely true. So policymakers here today, you can expect some great inputs from your younger compatriots in the coming months. And I think that what we can take from your response is the need to, on one hand, fight the stigma by raising awareness and knowledge about the mental health issues, but not only among young people, but also among the people who they are interacting with and who are their educators, so teachers in schools, parents perhaps, and so on. And also to have this, when we do that, to have this sort of tailored approach that is youth-friendly. So rather than having lectures, to have an approach which really resonates with young people and that really stays with them. So my next question for Ms. Mucho is, you are working with and representing young people at the national level as well as at the regional level. So your organizations that you're active with, they're not engaged with youth mental health specifically. However, as a young person yourself and someone working to empower young people in Albania and in the region, how do you see the relation between the mental health and what the organizations you are engaged with are doing? Is there a two-way relationship between what you are trying to achieve and between the mental health?
Thank you, Petra, for the question. Good day to everyone, dear colleagues coming from all over the region. Welcome in Tirana, and I hope that you will have a pleasant time during your stay here. I take the opportunity to thank RCC for the invitation and to congratulate for the second edition of the Western Balkan Youth Lab focused on this very important topic. And since I have been part of the first edition of Western Balkan Youth Lab focused on unemployment, I would like to say to all the people who have joined recently to enjoy the experience and to exploit every single opportunity that this project will provide to you. It is worth it. Coming back to our question now, since today I'm wearing two hats, firstly I will give the RICO approach. Two of the strategy priorities that RICO has, firstly is to develop regional cooperation, mobility and exchange, and to enable and to promote an enabling environment for youth in the region. In this regard, RICO invests in innovative ideas and partners with different organizations and schools who works with youth coming from diverse backgrounds. Moreover, from these young people can involve in activism and different activities who, without any doubts, increase their capacity and impact their well-being. And as you know, developing the active citizenship of young people and volunteering lead to feelings of belonging, stimulation, impact their personal growth, increase their integrity, increase their capacity to participate in the society and to participate in different decision-making processes or policy-making processes. And this is not something that I am saying out of nowhere. A growing number of researchers have explored the positive impact of activism on the well-being of the individuals involved. It's a fact now that regional youth cooperation brings opportunities to young people to socialize, exchange experience, thoughts, good practices, and to be leaders in the intercultural communication. And as a young person living in our region, but also as a professional, young professional engaged with different stakeholders, I would say that prejudice and stereotype continue to shape attitudes and behaviors in the Western Balkan regions by making young people live in the pressure and influence of social and political narratives that is distorted by prejudice, denial, etc. And inherent negative narratives form afterwards the basis for young people's future life choices about career, residence, friendships, and even the possibility of dialogue with other people. And this is what RICO is trying to work on, to mitigate the risk of this situation through using the power of traveling, diversity and inclusion. And maybe the activities that we have undertaken till now are not directly linked with mental health or do not speak in a direct way for mental health, but without any doubt, the improvement of mental health is a result of them. Now, when it comes to the Young Professionals Network, for whoever does not know us, YPN is a cooperative and development platform composed from young professionals and professional organizations. Our mission is to empower and develop young professionals by strengthening their rights, firstly, increasing the capacity and the ability to participate in the workforce, policy-making and decision-making processes. And as we know, mental health in youth is related to many aspects of youth life, such as school conditions, which were mentioned before, non-socialization with their peers, working conditions, stress coming from unemployment, or also from the insecurity that this region can often give. And all of the above are related to the vision and focus of the Young Professionals Network. Our projects till now have been focused on the professional and personal development of young professionals, so they will feel integrated in schools, in their societies, and also by developing those skills they will have easier access in the near future to the market. Those different projects and activities also increase the possibility to them to socialize with each other and understand the power of networking, the importance of communicating and establishing social relationships with peers, thus breaking prejudice or stereotypes that they might have. So as long as we at YPN are focused on the youth quality of life, I think that the correlation is quite clear. But of course that there is the need to speak for the elephant in the room in a direct way, and not, of course, that also the activities undertaken that in indirect way impact mental health of young people are more than needed, but also it is necessary to speak in a direct way for the problems that young people have in schools, in their workplace, and the work that they do under pressure, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you. You are absolutely right in that the things that these networks and organizations are doing has a positive effect not only on the participants of these networks and organizations, which you will all have the pleasure of experiencing in the coming period, but also when we are striving for a better region and for better economies in which the young people have opportunities to choose from rather than having them scarce and looking for them elsewhere. That will certainly provide a better environment for them and their mental health as well. So we now come to our final panelist, last but definitely not least. Ms. Cic, very simply, why the International Youth Health Organization? Or to put it differently, so we are all aware that there is a World Health Organization. During the pandemic, we have all become very aware of that fact. But why is it important to have an international youth health organization? How does it deal with the mental health? How has the mental health come to the agenda? And we would be very grateful if you could share with us some of the good European or global practices that you are aware of in that regard.
Thank you for the questions and thank you for the invitation. So your first question was why the International Youth Health Organization, and my answer is why not? Youth is the biggest demographic currently existing on Earth, reaching up to 2 billion people worldwide, and yet in Europe it is one of the smaller generations, and it's getting smaller due to low childbirth, lifestyle changes, and demographic shifts. So that means that this is the opportune time to invest more in youth and to invest more in youth health, because youth health is something that is very specific. Because it has to be tailored to the very specific needs of the age groups that are covered in the term that we say as youth. Because within this demographic of youth, we are actually seeing sort of smaller age groups that have their own specifics. So one style-fits-all solution is not something that is necessarily viable. So we have to make sure that all our work, all our interventions, and all our policies are actually tailored to this ever-changing situation. So in terms of the Youth Health Organization, we are an international network that started as Alcohol Policy Youth Network, but then very quickly realized that the issue of youth health in Europe goes much deeper, so we broadened our scope of work and also changed our name to the currently existing International Youth Health Organization. And our main mission is to provide the space to empower youth in matters of taking care of their own health, but at the same time advocating for better youth health for other young people and for their environment as well. At the same time, we're also here to exist and provide them with opportunities to elevate the youth voices and actually take part in decision-making processes. Because work on health, and especially youth health, does not simply start with a pandemic, because as you said, the world realized that there is a World Health Organization with the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, COVID-19 has definitely impacted the mental health of generations, and especially young people, by a lot. But it has also provided us with an opportunity to really see how much political will is actually needed in order to make sure that health is always on the political agenda and not just put into the background. The WHO, so the Youth Health Organization, also exists to provide an international exchange of best practices and to also foster fruitful collaborations between our members, which are youth-led and youth-focused organizations. They're really here to make sure that youth health is put at the front of the agenda and make sure that the needs of the youth are actually taken into account whenever policymakers are designing policies or strategies or action plans that have to deal with youth, but do not necessarily include the youth voices in. You also asked me as to how mental health got onto our agenda. And mental health is actually an integral part of health. It's a cross-cutting issue that delves into a lot of other, not just health issues, but also lifestyle aspects that were previously mentioned by other panelists. So it requires an interdisciplinary and a cross-generational approach to make sure that the mental health is not forgotten and that mental health is also highlighted as something that the young generations are the ones that they are experiencing it the most. And at the same time, it is also important to mention that we are seeing a very big shift in Europe in terms of young people, because they are the ones who are leading the action and actually being the most vocal about mental health across all the generations that currently exist. And mental health doesn't just start or end somewhere. We always have it. It's either good or it is bad. So that means that we have to take care of it. And now to talk a little bit about mental health, especially when it comes to youth. There are some very specific topics that can be covered throughout this youth lab, especially because we are seeing a lot of emerging mental health conditions that are directly impacting youth and are currently being researched, such as the Zoom fatigue, the climate anxiety, the Instagram and Snapchat dysmorphia, just to name a few. So it's never too late to start talking about it, so I'm very, very happy to see that mental health is the topic of this youth lab that we are here right now. And it is important to not just work on the policy on youth mental health, but it is important to highlight the meaningful youth engagement parts of it and have young people actually be a part of not just development, but also the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the policies that exist in the region. And to talk a little bit also about the best practices, in Europe, we are seeing a lot of youth action when it comes to mental health. I have a wonderful co-panelist that also mentioned some of the activities that youth is already doing, and Youth Health Organization is also hosting a number of opportunities and events when it comes to mental health. Just this year, we hosted a study session where we built up a manifesto on student mental health. We hosted a month-long campaign on mental health with a couple of other NGOs in the region that were specifically tailored to youth and to the topics that youth is interested in. We also analyzed how is mental health being represented in the media. And with next year coming up as the European Year of the Youth, this means that we have the best possible space and the best possible timing to make the changes to policies, because one of the European Union's youth goals is also mental health. But at the same time, I also want to highlight some of the best practices that are not just coming from the top to bottom approach, but that are actually really making sure that it is shown how the grassroots actions are the ones that usually bring about the most meaningful impact. And that is just simply taking care of your own mental health, and by taking action, by participating in a wider societal change, even if it's just opening your mind and educating yourself about the topic of mental health. One such topic that is often forgotten is the correct terminology when it comes to mental health. Just to give you an example, Petra in the very beginning mentioned suicide. And suicide is the leading cause of death amongst young people across Europe. And yet, suicidal ideation is a cry for help and not a crime, and yet we refer to suicide as something that we commit. We don't. It's a cry for help. So we shouldn't make negative connotations towards it. Similar goes to terminology, let's say, to successful suicide. Why do we associate success with something that is a sad event that can be prevented? And at the same time, when we are referring to other people, we shouldn't associate the disease with the person, but we should definitely make sure that it is referred to as a person with depression and not as a depressed person or a bipolar person and so on. So these are just some very, very tiny changes that everyone can do in their daily lives. And now to sort of end on a more positive note, it is important also to mention that in Europe, we see a large variety of organizations that are youth-led or youth-focused, and whether that is national youth councils or medical or healthcare student organizations, or even just other organizations that are focusing on youth health. We're seeing a lot of action. We are seeing a lot of not just regional and national action, but we are seeing a lot of collaborations that are transcending borders and really making sure that the interdisciplinary approach is there. So with that, I would like to wish you a successful youth lab and to make sure that the aspects of mental health, meaningful youth engagement, as well as what we can do as individuals and as organizations are not forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja. I want to echo one thing that you have said during your response, and that is the role of the political will to keep health on the agenda. And that's why I'm glad that when we were talking about the topic for the second Youth Lab, this was done through the consultations with both the youth and the policymakers, and we were all happy to see that policymakers and youth alike recognize this topic, and we hope to keep this political will to talk about this and to make positive changes in the future. I also want to thank you for the note on the correct terminology use. I mean, those are such small, they seem cosmetic changes, but they really do make a big difference in the long run. I've seen Ms. Vučković raising a hand.
Yes, so please allow me just to mention important solutions that we have not mentioned as a panel so far. I think peer-to-peer engagement is very important. So what can a young person interested in this topic do to support her or his friends? I support my peers, I support my friends' approach is very important, not in a way to treat or counsel, but to refer and provide informal support as a caring friend. This is important. So one solution that we also have recognized together with Opens is that. And Novi Sad has this beautiful heritage of being European youth capital, so we are now living also on that wave. And we have a community of NGOs in Novi Sad that collected themselves in one union. They call themselves Sazverzje Podrške, or Universum of support. And now we are working with them through Opens and connecting NGOs with the Institute for Mental Health to speak together, to see what are the standards of community support that needs to exist in order to make sure that the quality is there, and that trained professionals, young professionals, as volunteers with supervision, offer free of charge one-to-one or group support. There is also very important, let's say, knowledge resources with WHO and UNICEF guidelines helping adolescents thrive, and other things which need to be consulted in order to see what kind of intervention have proven successful in previous years. We said that there is important data, but so far we have, particularly in our economy, only limited data with regards to mental health of adolescents and young adults. We don't know what is the prevalence on the national level about anxiety and depression, which is important to have in every economy in order to, let's say, base the policy on that data and measure several years after the implementation of particular policy what have changed in that regard. One wonderful movie we have also translated and actually bought right to use it. It is called Connecting the Dots, and it is perfectly pictures mental health of young people in every single society throughout the world. And in that movie, it is a good tool to let's say raise awareness on local level and national level that this is problems and that there are solutions to be connected, let's say. We will train into this project called Digital Divide that was also supported by European Union school psychologists to, let's say, offer help to some let's say groups of pupils, and to also link others within the community and form local plans for mental health of young people. So this is another solution to consider. This is it. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for your intervention. So this is exactly, you have mentioned some good practices, and this is exactly one of the goals of Western Balkans Youth Lab, is also to exchange on a regional level the good practices, to learn from one another, and to all of us collectively get better at what we are trying to achieve. So I want to thank all of you for your expertise and for your contribution. As everybody sees, so we have panelists coming from different, let's say, fields of work, but all together they make a very valuable contribution to our understanding of the topic that you are about to embark on. Allow me for conclusion just to refer very shortly to the working groups that you will be having later on. Those are the working groups on mental health awareness and knowledge, prevention in terms of mental health, as well as support measures. And I have taken the liberty during this discussion to jot down a few things that might serve as a food for thought during those discussions in the working groups. So when it comes to awareness and knowledge, we have learned that lack of knowledge is the principal reason that leads to stigma, which we have heard prevents effective mental health access and measures. And the first question that we need to answer is, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? This is something that we now understand happens much too late. So this is the conversation that we need to have at an earlier age, that we need to have in a way that is more effective for young people, let's say with workshops. We have also learned that empirical data that we do have needs to be supported also by practical experience. And here we come to the issue of data, which we have heard we do not have enough of, and that's something that we need to begin addressing as well. And finally, raising awareness not only among young people as the ones who are looking for help, but also among educators and those who are offering that help. When it comes to prevention, we often hear this focus on childhood and adolescence, but we should not neglect the mental health needs of young adults who are a vulnerable group. Again, stigma comes across as a cross-cutting issue. And if we do address stigma in an effective way, this will lead to more readiness by young people to approach healthcare professionals, or even at least family and friends, to talk about mental health issues and begin tackling them. It's also important to enable access on time. So before a mental health issue becomes as too large, or before it becomes so large that it takes more effort than perhaps would be necessary if prevention was done on time. We also need to be aware of the new circumstances as they are developing and to stay alert. So not to create a policy today and then keep it for the rest of the lifetime, but to make sure that as the circumstances change, so do our approaches adapt. And something that was now mentioned, the peer-to-peer approach, is also something that, from what I have understood as a preventative measure especially, could be very useful. And finally, when it comes to the support measures, access to services, obviously this is the key point, that we want to enable young people access to services, but not only access as such, but also their understanding, information that they have about this access, to address the fact that perhaps the mental health support is there, but it is expensive, or there is stigma related to it. When we enable access, we also have to take into account specific local experiences and local communities. We have to ensure that the services that are provided are of high quality, that the professionals providing support are trained and supervised. And finally, what I have noted already, the use of correct terminology, which again, stigma comes up as a cross-cutting issue, and using the correct terminology could be one step toward removing the stigma, or at least decreasing it. I will finish on that. Thank you all very much once again. Thank you also the participants for your attention, and I wish you a very happy first and second day of the kickoff event. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you, dear panelists, for your insights and for great inputs that, of course, will serve for the working groups that we are starting with after the coffee break. So just before all of us enjoy coffee that will last until 11:20, I would just kindly like to ask you, near the doors, we are having 3 flip charts, just to write your name on the working group where you would like to be part of during today's discussions. So as of the coffee break, we are starting with discussions, and no more, let's say, no more discussions where only few people will participate, but we really count on your active participation of all participants, policymakers and young people being with us today. So please, on your way towards the coffee break, just put your name on the flip chart you would like to be part of. And what we highly encourage is that we do not have more than 2 or 3 people from one economy in one of the working groups. Thank you very much and enjoy.